The crisp autumn air carried a quiet stillness over the small town of Hawthorne. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and life followed an unspoken rhythm, steady, predictable, and some would say unshakable. That was until one evening when a single accusation sent ripples through the town, threatening to shatter that illusion of stability. Maggie Thornton had never considered herself reckless. As the daughter of Deputy Sheriff Bill Thornton, she had grown up with a strong sense of right and wrong, always hearing her father talk about justice and law. But that night, standing in the parking lot, outside a local diner, heart pounding in her chest, all she knew was fear. The man standing across from her was tall, well-dressed, and unfamiliar. In a town like Hawthorne, unfamiliar faces stood out, and Maggie's gut reaction was instant. Something about him felt out of place, suspicious even. Her mind raced as she clutched her phone tightly. She had heard the warnings. Her father had always told her to stay alert, to never take chances when she felt unsafe. And so, with her pulse hammering in her ears, she did the one thing she had been taught to do. She pointed at the man, her voice sharp and loud enough to catch the attention of those nearby. "You were following me," she accused, her breath hitching. "I saw you watching me in the diner." The man's eyes widened slightly, surprise flashing across his face. He had been on his way to his car, reaching for his keys, when she suddenly turned on him. For a moment, he seemed taken aback, and then something else settled in his expression, an understanding that this was about to turn into something bigger than it should be. The diner's door swung open, and a few heads turned toward the commotion. Among them was the town sheriff, Maggie's father. His face hardened the moment he saw his daughter, her stance defensive, her voice rising with urgency. Years of experience took over, and in an instant, he moved toward her, one hand already hovering near his belt. "What's going on here?" His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Maggie pointed again, her eyes locked onto the stranger. "He was watching me inside and then followed me out. I think he was trying to—" She stopped short, swallowing the lump in her throat. The words felt too heavy to say outright, but the implication was there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud about to break. The stranger let out a slow breath, his face unreadable. But instead of panicking, instead of raising his voice or trying to defend himself, he simply reached into the pocket of his tailored suit and pulled out a slim, leather wallet. With deliberate calmness, he flipped it open and held it out. A golden badge gleamed under the streetlights, and right below it, printed in bold letters, Attorney General Marcus Hale. Silence fell over the parking lot. The sheriff, mid-motion, froze, his eyes narrowing as they flicked between his daughter and the man in front of him. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. The weight of her own words suddenly pressed down on her. The Attorney General. The Attorney General. Panic crept in as she realized what she had just done. Marcus Hale studied her for a moment, then turned his gaze toward her father. "Sheriff," he said smoothly, his tone controlled but unmistakably firm. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Maggie's heartbeat pounded so hard, she thought it might echo through the night. A misunderstanding. That was putting it lightly. And in that moment, as her father took a slow step forward, his face a mix of disbelief and caution, Maggie understood one thing clearly. This wasn't going to go away easily. Not tonight, not in this town, and certainly not when the man she had just accused was one of the most powerful figures in the state. Deputy Sheriff Bill Thornton's face was tight with tension as he stared at the badge in Marcus Hale's hand. The weight of the moment settled over the parking lot, thick and unspoken. A few lingering eyes from the diner's doorway watched, waiting to see how this would unfold. The sheriff had spent years enforcing the law, keeping order in this town. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he found himself uncertain of his next move. Maggie, standing stiff beside him, felt her skin burn with embarrassment. Her mouth had gone dry, her pulse still racing. Just minutes ago, she had been so sure of what she was doing. The way Marcus had looked at her in the diner, the way she thought he had followed her out, it had seemed so clear in her mind. And yet, standing here now, facing the Attorney General of the state, she realized how dangerously wrong she had been. Marcus exhaled, his expression unreadable. He had dealt with uncomfortable situations before, had stood in the middle of courtroom battles that could make or break entire careers. But this was different. This was personal. "I came into town tonight for a meeting," he finally said, his voice measured. "Stopped at the diner for a meal before heading to my hotel." He held Maggie's gaze for a moment, before shifting his eyes to the sheriff. That's all. The silence stretched. The weight of his words, the implication of everything that had just happened, settled in the space between them. The sheriff was the first to move. He took a slow step forward, his fingers tightening at his sides. He had known men like Marcus before, powerful, composed, and carrying a presence that could shake a room without raising their voice. Bill had worked under enough county prosecutors to know that this was not the kind of man who would let something like this slide. "I think," the sheriff cleared his throat, "I think we should talk." Marcus nodded slightly, but his expression didn't change. He had already decided that much. Maggie stood frozen, watching as her father and Marcus moved toward the sheriff's cruiser. She could feel the stares from the people still standing in the doorway of the diner. Whispers would start soon. By morning, half the town would be talking about this. And the more she thought about it, the worse the realization became. She hadn't just accused a random man. She had accused someone with influence, someone who wouldn't be easily ignored. Inside the sheriff's office, the air was thick with quiet tension. The old wooden desk, worn from years of service, sat between them as Sheriff Thornton folded his arms, leaning slightly forward. Marcus, now seated across from him, didn't bother to lean back. He stayed perfectly still, his eyes sharp, his posture unwavering. "I assume you understand the weight of what just happened," Marcus said after a long pause. The sheriff nodded. "I do." Marcus studied him, then glanced toward the closed door, where Maggie had been told to wait outside. "Does she?" Bill hesitated. He had raised Maggie to be smart, cautious, but he had also raised her in a town where things like this rarely happened, where quick judgments and gut feelings often dictated the way people saw the world. "I'll make sure she does," he finally said. Marcus let out a slow breath, his fingers tapping against the edge of the desk. He wasn't the kind of man who sought revenge, but he also wasn't the kind of man to let things slide without making a point. "This isn't just about tonight," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying weight. "It's about what could have happened. You and I both know that in a different place, under different circumstances, that accusation could have cost me more than just my time." The sheriff didn't argue. He couldn't. Meanwhile, Maggie sat alone in the hallway outside, her stomach twisted into knots. She had never seen her father so serious before, never seen him hesitate the way he had tonight. The weight of her mistake was settling in fully now, and it was unbearable. Her mind replayed the moment over and over again, the way she had jumped to conclusions, how sure she had been. But the hardest part was realizing that the fear she had felt, it had been real to her in that moment, and that was what scared her the most. She looked up as the door opened. Marcus stepped out first, his face unreadable as he walked past her. He didn't say a word, didn't even look in her direction. Her father followed a few seconds later, his expression heavy. Maggie stood, searching his face for some kind of answer, some kind of reassurance, but all he said was, "Go home. We'll talk later." She swallowed hard and nodded. But as she walked out of the station and into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Back inside, Marcus stopped at the door, turning to face the sheriff one last time. "This town," he said, his voice even. "It has a choice to make." The sheriff met his gaze. He knew exactly what Marcus meant, and as Marcus stepped out into the cool night air, he knew this wasn't the end, not even close. Maggie barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment replay in her head, her pointing finger, the accusations spilling from her mouth, the flash of the Attorney General's badge. She had always thought of herself as a good person, someone who believed in fairness, in justice. But now she wasn't so sure. The next morning, the town was already buzzing. Whispers floated through the grocery store, the gas station, even the church parking lot. Everyone had heard some version of what had happened. Some said Maggie had accused a stranger. Others knew exactly who Marcus Hale was. And there were those who didn't need details. They had already decided what they wanted to believe. Maggie sat at the kitchen table, barely touching her coffee, when her father finally spoke. "You need to make this right." Her stomach twisted. She had known this was coming. She had wanted to believe the whole thing would just fade away, that people would move on. But that wasn't how life worked. Not when you made a mistake like this. Bill watched his daughter closely. "Marcus isn't just going to forget about this. And neither is the town. You're lucky he didn't push this further. The least you can do is face him." Maggie swallowed hard. She had never been one to back down from responsibility, but this was different. This was public. This was humiliating, but it was also necessary. That afternoon, she found herself standing outside the courthouse, nerves tangled in knots. The last place she wanted to be, the last person she wanted to face. Marcus was already inside, going over papers with his team. He didn't look surprised to see her when she walked in. He didn't look angry either, just patient, like he had been expecting her. Maggie took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she said. The words small but honest. "I was wrong, and I should have thought before I acted." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he set his papers down and studied her. "You were afraid," he said finally. "I get that." Maggie blinked. She hadn't expected him to say that. "But fear," he continued, "doesn't excuse consequences. It doesn't undo what could have happened. Do you understand that?" She nodded, shame burning in her chest. "I do." Marcus leaned back, considering her. "What matters now is what you do next. Not just with me, but in general. Because this isn't just about last night. It's about the way we see people, the way we react before we even know the truth." Maggie nodded again, but this time it felt different. This time she really understood. She didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't expect things to go back to normal. But she knew now that what she had done wasn't just a mistake. It was a moment that could have changed everything. And she wouldn't let herself forget that. As she stepped outside, the autumn air felt different on her skin, like something had shifted, like she had finally begun to see the world the way it really was.